If you were to follow me around in my kitchen on any given week, you would see me here all the time. That's the running joke in our family, is if you're looking for mom, just come to the kitchen. I have such a passion for cooking and making whole foods from scratch. And one of my favorite things is to carry on traditional family recipes and even to create some of our own. If you clicked on this video, that's what you're about to watch. So let's cozy up and cook. We've got lots going on in the kitchen this week. There are lots of fall-inspired recipes on the menu this week. And so I thought it would be fun to welcome you into my kitchen as I cook and prepare food for both ourselves and for others. We're starting off today by making a meal for ourselves and friends of ours who recently had a baby. And so I am bringing them one of our personal favorite meals. This is a traditional meal that both Zach and I have eaten throughout our childhood, and that is pierogies and farmer sausage and cream gravy. The pierogies I'm making today are cheddar and potato. I would say this is probably the most common flavor, or the most enjoyed flavor, at least by our family. We also really love cottage cheese pierogies. Zach's grandma makes apple pierogies and Saskatoon berry pierogies. Those are recipes that I would love to learn from her as well. I love being able to carry on the tradition of making food, especially recipes that have been passed down from generation to generation, as well as starting our own new family traditional recipes. And I have many that have been added to our own family cookbook, if you will. I'm going to be sharing some of those with you today. So join me this week in our kitchen as I prepare food for my family. Growing up, we didn't eat a lot of scratch-made pierogies. They were often purchased from local homemakers, but always purchased, just because they are a lot of work and my mom was a busy lady. But I want to carry on those homemade traditional recipes, so I'm learning to make them from scratch. This is not my grandma's recipe. This is a recipe I found online, and it's essentially a noodle dough. The recipe involves 6 cups of flour, as well as water, eggs, oil, and salt. I actually use avocado oil in place of the canola oil. The dough is mixed and kneaded. I'm just going to set this aside for a little bit now to let it rest. We'll let it rest for like half an hour to an hour, really whenever we have time to come back to that. In the meantime, I'm gonna get started on the filling. The star of the show today is mashed potatoes, leftover mashed potatoes. So we had this for supper last night, and I purposely made too much knowing that I was going to use it today. So this is just regular mashed potatoes. There's salt, pepper, butter, milk, cream. I'm gonna add that to the bowl along with some cheese and some onion powder. If it needs to be loosened up a little bit, I'll also add some more cream or milk. Looking at this, I do realize that it looks kind of gross to think about cold leftover mashed potatoes as the filling for our pierogies, but I'm telling you that these pierogies were hands down the best pierogies I've ever made. The onion powder really made all the difference. Alright, the dough has been resting for about 30 minutes, but things are about to get a little bit messy. It's a very simple process, and I think it might be easier just to show you instead of tell you. To make the pierogies, you'll need to divide the dough into separate sections. I did 4 sections to make it easier to handle at once, and then it is time to hand roll out the dough, which takes time, which takes muscle, and a lot of flour to make sure that it doesn't stick to the counter. But once you finally have it rolled out, you want it quite thin. Then it's time to cut out circles. Now I'm using the scalloped cookie cutter, but that's not necessary here. Using a small cookie scoop, I'm scooping the filling into each one of these circles. And then it's been a little while since I've made these. I was a little bit rusty. You want to fold your circles in half and pinch the edges, securing the filling inside. Now the key is not to get the filling on the edges at all. If the filling is oozing out while you're pinching it, your pierogies will very likely explode in the water as they're cooking later. And I'm going to show you a little bit my technique that I figured out in order to avoid that situation. Collect the scraps of dough, but don't toss them. You can actually re-roll the dough and use it again, just like cookie dough. Here's the technique I was talking about. I like to pull the edges of the dough out so that I have more wiggle room to actually get the pierogi dough around the filling without touching any of the mashed potato. This works much easier, and yes, this is a very long, tedious process. actually need to put a pause on the pierogies for a minute because I just realized I'm running out of time and I need to get my dessert in the oven. For dessert tonight, I am making apple crisp. This is my mom's recipe. It's technically a fruit crisp, and she will do whatever fruit she has on hand. So you can do like strawberry rhubarb, Saskatoon berry, apple. Tonight I'm doing apple. This crisp is a little bit different than many crisps that I've seen because it has like a cornstarch syrup on top of the fruit. And when I make this, I'm also going to do a little bit less sugar than it calls for because I do find it to be very sweet. For the crisp, you'll need half a cup of melted butter, 3/4 cups of oatmeal, 1 cup of flour, 3/4 cups of brown sugar, and half a teaspoon of cinnamon. If you want to make a 9x13 pan, you would just double this amount. You want the crumble mixture to hold its shape when it's squished. Half of this mixture is going to go into the bottom of the baking dish and needs to be pressed down firmly. Then you can move on to the syrup, which is just half a cup of sugar, half a cup of water, and 1 tablespoon of cornstarch. You just want to heat that up and cook it until it's thickened and bubbling, then add just a splash of vanilla. I actually have some apples in the freezer that I'm going to be using, and these are from our own tree. I washed, chopped, and froze these so that I could quickly use them in crisps or pies, which comes in really handy in situations like this when I am running a little bit late. So I'm just gonna put about 3 to 4 cups worth of fruit in here. And then when my sugary syrup is done, then I'm going to pour that over top, then more of the crumble, and then into the oven it goes. The hot syrup goes over top of the fruit and then the remaining crumble, and it's into the oven at 350 for about 1 hour or until it's baked through. While that was baking, I got back to making my pierogies. This did take a good part of the afternoon to get all of this done, but this amount was enough to feed both our family and another family for 2 meals each, so 4 meals altogether. I ran out of filling before I was able to use up the rest of the dough, so I am actually going to wrap this up and freeze this so that I can make pierogies another time. But I have 2 pans of pierogies ready to go. Those are going to cook really fast because they're fresh, so I'm not going to cook those until the very last minute. But in the meantime, I'm going to work on my sides. We're going to have this with a side of steamed green beans, fry up some farmer sausage, and make some cream gravy to go with our pierogies. This is Mennonite farmer sausage. This is a meat that both Zach and I grew up on. We usually make this ourselves. We will butcher a pig once a year, either in spring or in fall, and then we'll make a big batch of sausage that lasts all year. We had just run out of our sausage though, so this is store-bought. But I love this because it is just pork, salt, and pepper. There's no other ingredients. Our favorite way of cooking it is just like this, just slicing the pieces in half and frying it up on a pan. On the side, I am making cream gravy. I love cream gravy. I grew up on cream gravy, and it's funny because all it is butter and flour to make a roux. Then you just slowly add whipping cream, salt, and pepper. And I never measured this. I don't think there's actually measurements for this. You just keep adding whipping cream until it becomes this beautiful thick gravy. Now that I've got everything else cooking on the stove, I'm going to start cooking my pierogies. They cook in 2 to 3 minutes max. You just want them to boil long enough until they are cooked through. And you know they're cooked when they start rising to the top and floating on the surface. But it's funny because this is a true stovetop meal. Every single burner was in use. All of my caraway pots and pans were in use, and this feels like the perfect segue into today's sponsor. The reason I make most of our food from scratch is twofold. First of all, it saves us so much money. Second, I just don't love the ingredients that are in the foods that are commonly found at the grocery store. And so I like to make as much as I can from scratch with ingredients that are wholesome and real. But food dyes and preservatives and ingredients that I cannot pronounce are not the only dangers within our food. Did you know that 97% of Americans have PFAs in their blood? PFAs is a toxic chemical that is commonly found in non-stick cookware pans such as Teflon. That's right. The pan you are using to cook with might actually be harming you. Immune system and reproductive issues, even cancers, have been linked to PFAs. For our family with young kids in the house, it is extremely important for me to be using cookware that is safe for my family, especially if I'm going the extra mile to be making our food from scratch. That is why I love my Caraway cookware so much. Caraway is a non-toxic kitchenware brand that makes high quality pots and pans and other kitchen essentials. Fun fact, the founder of Caraway actually got sick by overheating a Teflon pan, and he got sick with something that's commonly known as the Teflon flu. After walking through this, he did some research and learned that it only takes 2.5 minutes for a traditional Teflon coated nonstick pan to heat up to 500 degrees Fahrenheit and start releasing those chemicals into the air. I don't know about you, but I sure don't want that in my food, much less in the air that I'm breathing and my kids are breathing. Caraway uses a ceramic coating that provides a naturally slick surface without the toxins. That means you can still use a minimal amount of oil and butter and you won't be struggling with food sticking to your pan. It also makes it a breeze to clean. We've been enjoying our Caraway pots and pans for well over a year now, and they have been through some heavy use. You all know how much I'm in the kitchen and how much I'm using these pans every single day, and they have held up extremely well. I am very impressed with the quality of these. Even after a year of really heavy use, they still look and feel and cook like they're brand new. I've gotten a lot of questions about my pots and pans and whether I actually like them, whether they actually hold up the way that people say they do, and yes, I can attest, they are just as good as everybody says they are. Throughout this video, you've already seen me cooking with these pots and pans, and you're going to continue seeing me use them throughout the rest of this video and for many more years to come, just as you've seen me using them throughout the last year. These are hands down the nicest pots and pans I've ever used, and the fact that they are completely non-toxic gives me such peace of mind knowing that I am cooking with something safe for my family. These pots come with a really handy storage system. These holders are magnetic, so they snap together. I can easily store all my pots and pans just like this inside my cupboard. And inside the cupboard door is where I store the pot lids. And I think this might be one of my most favorite features in the set, is that all of the pots and pans have a matching lid. If you're wanting to swap out your pots and pans for a non-toxic alternative, check out Caraway. I highly recommend getting the bundle because when you get the bundle, you actually save 20% versus buying everything separate. Plus, you can stack my discount code LEPKE10 to get an additional 10% off. And the best part is my code LEPKE10 will provide you with 10% off of the entire site in case you are looking for something more than just pots and pans. Make sure to go and check the description box to find all of the details there, and thank you again, Caraway, for sponsoring today's video. Truly, I love my Caraway pans so much. While that was cooking, the apple crisp finished up so I could pull that out of the oven just in time because we were just about to bring this over to our friends. I was cooking so many pierogies today that I had to do it in batches. And a little tip, if you drizzle a little bit of oil over your pierogies once they've been cooked and mix them up, they won't stick so much to each other. After all was said and done, it was time to plate up our meal. This hit the spot. So good. The next day we had it as leftovers, and I warmed up the pierogies on a pan with some butter, and the edges got a little bit crispy, and it was just so good. The next morning started early in the kitchen, as many of my mornings do. This day I was prepping a batch of sourdough sandwich loaves. Early in the morning, and I am getting my bread dough going. I am making some sourdough sandwich loaves, which I honestly haven't made in a really long time. Over the summer, I've been using yeast instead of sourdough just because we were gone a lot and it didn't really work with our schedule. But now that it is colder and we're getting back into more of a solid routine, we're going to be home more, I figured it is time that I start doing sourdough once again. So the thing about sourdough is that it just takes a lot longer, so I can really only make bread if I'm going to be home all day, or at least the majority of the day. Today I want these to be done before supper because I'd love to use the bread for supper. So I got this started at 7 this morning. I'm gonna let this rise in a warm place all day. I'll come back to it a little bit later. If you hear little nibbling, crunching sounds over there, it's because my kids are enjoying their lunch. But this has been rising all morning in the oven with the light on because that's the warmest place that I can put this. I'm going to take this out now, divide it into two, and prepare it for the muffins. Working with sourdough is always a little bit different than working with a yeast dough because it tends to be a little bit more sticky. Now it looks really sticky right now, but I'm not going to add flour. I'm actually just going to create tension by pulling it up and folding it over itself, and then picking it up, folding it over itself, and just continuing to do that until it's not sticky anymore. Sometimes I'll also roll it up, and then I'll pick it up, slap it down, roll it up. Roll it up on the other side. Once the dough stops sticking too much and is starting to hold its shape, that means enough tension has been built. So in order to shape these loaves, I like to flatten out the dough into a rectangle shape, roll it up, pinch the edges, and then just drag it across the countertop a few more times to continue shaping it and building up a little bit more tension. Then these go into parchment-lined loaf pans, and then I put them back into the oven. The oven was off, but the light was on, just so that they had a warm place to rise with a wet dish towel over top. We just got a huge box of apples that I am really excited to turn into apple butter and apple pies and apple crisps. I'm not totally sure how I'm going to use all of them yet, but I do know that today I would like to make some more apple butter. This is already my second batch of apple butter this year. My kids eat through it so quickly, it's like candy to them. And it also makes really good Christmas gifts, and you know, it's nice to have in the pantry. While I'm at it, I'm also washing some tomatoes for tonight's supper. These were actually grown in our garden. This was the biggest one that we got this year. Big red. So this afternoon, while my sourdough bread rises, I am going to make some tomato soup, and I'm gonna make some apple butter. Just gonna spend the afternoon in the kitchen. Last year I had 50 pounds or 40 pounds of apples that I made into apple butter, applesauce, and I did not have one of these handy machines. So this was on my Christmas list last year, and I got it for Christmas and didn't pull it out until now. And I'm telling you, this is one of the greatest little machines ever. It peels my apples, cores my apples, and slices them all at once. I just fill up the pot with apples, add 2 cups of sugar, a little bit of molasses, some nutmeg, cloves, salt. Then I put it into the pressure cooker at medium pressure for about 1 hour. This really speeds up the cooking process. Also, none of those apple cores or peels went to waste. I am attempting to make apple cider vinegar from scratch by just stuffing all of the apple scraps into a jar and then filling up the jar with honey water. I'm gonna let that sit in the pantry for a couple weeks. It's already been sitting in the pantry for about a week now, and it's been fermenting and it smells really interesting, so I don't really know what I'm doing. Hopefully it's working. I am going to get started on supper now. I'm making homemade tomato soup with tomatoes from our garden, which is really special. I don't have a recipe for this, but it turns out really good every single time I make it. So I'm gonna start with the tomatoes. I'm gonna take out all the grains and then lay them in a pan. I have my oven preheated to 450 degrees. I'm just going to throw these in here with some olive oil, salt, pepper, and some garlic. And we're gonna get that roasting in the oven until the skins are charred. And then I can pull them out and throw them in the soup. This roasting step is not necessary. You could just add the tomatoes into the pot and cook them down that way, but I really enjoy that almost like charred, fire roasted flavor when the tomatoes are baked like this. So while those are in the oven, I am getting my onions caramelized in my pot just to get the base of the soup ready for when the tomatoes do come out of the oven. Once they're out, I'll add everything into the pot and start blending it with my immersion blender, being very, very careful not to touch the sides of this pot. Being careful of the edges of the ceramic coating. Because it was quite thick, I did add some chicken stock, I added some more salt and pepper. I also added some fresh basil and just blended it and tasted it. I did end up adding sugar as well. I love how this just enhances the taste of the tomatoes and cuts down on some of that acidity. Meanwhile, the apple butter was done cooking. The apple should be super soft and will start to break apart. But then I like to set my pressure cooker onto saute to continue reducing down the apples into a thicker paste. Coming back to the soup, this is another unnecessary step, but I really like it this way. My family really likes it this way. We're a little bit iffy on the texture of tomatoes. We don't love the texture of tomatoes. So I like to strain the seeds and the skins from my soup. I believe I also added a little bit of cream to the soup as well. Back to the apple butter, it had reduced down enough that it was a nice thick consistency, so I added some vanilla, and using that immersion blender, again, I blended it all up. And you can see how much those apples reduced down. Since I am canning this, I had my cans sanitizing in the dishwasher. I had my canner ready, everything ready to go, so I started canning these up. I'm still new to canning. I wish I had more time to practice more. I feel like almost every single time I can, I run into some new issue that I haven't experienced before. I'm not very confident in this yet, but I am learning. This time is no exception. We had canning issues today too. Things are a little bit chaotic in here right now. We've got food in the canner, we've got food in the oven, I'm about to have food on the stove top. I'm also making buns for a future dinner. My bread is nowhere near ready to be baked, and I don't know why it's taking so long, but it's taking a really long time. Thankfully, I did have one extra loaf in the freezer that I'm going to be using today. Now that the soup is done, I'm gonna get the grilled cheese going and him eat supper. Got a lot of hungry kiddos right now. I gotta get this done. There's nothing like grilled cheese on homemade bread. Now, the key to making a really good grilled cheese is to butter the outsides of the bread before putting it in the pan. And then tons and tons of cheese. I like to do a mix of like mozzarella and cheddar. And then I love using the caraway lids. This helps to melt the cheese without over toasting the bread. At this point, it was time to pull my cans out of the canner, and I realized we ran into an issue, and I was very confused trying to figure out what exactly happened, but no time to worry about it now because it was time to eat. Kiddos were really hungry. I was really hungry. Things were a little chaotic in the kitchen today, but that's okay. That's how it goes. But this warm meal really hit the spot. What was up yesterday, but things just kept going wrong. My bread didn't rise. It was rising all day and didn't rise. So I put it in the fridge overnight and hopefully it finishes rising today. And one of my jars of apple butter, the lid popped off while it was in the canner. One jar was completely wasted. I don't know what happened, why that happened. This one did not seal. So we have 5 successful jars of apple butter, but we'll just eat this one first and these ones will go into the pantry. But I don't know, it was just a day of things not working out. Hopefully today is better. This morning I am making pancakes and bacon. I used to make pancakes all the time, but then I think we just kind of got sick of them, and so I stopped making them for a while. But recently I started making them again, and at this time of year in fall, I love adding some cinnamon and nutmeg into our pancakes, and it was a huge hit. Like, my third child ate more food than I did. So I'm going to make that again today. I'm going to show you my go-to pancake recipe because it's really good, really easy, and obviously a huge hit. Do I make pancakes and bacon on a regular basis? No, I don't. This is a very quick and easy recipe to make, so it's not like it takes a ton of extra effort, but this is not something that I would make every single day. I keep breakfast really quite simple. We usually just do, toast and eggs or yogurt parfaits or, something easy and simple, but some days it's nice to switch it up and do something a little bit different. So pancakes it was today. I love switching it up. In summertime, I love adding chocolate chips or Saskatoon berries, blueberries, any form of berry really. But this time of year, something about cinnamon and nutmeg just really hits the spot. Whenever I make pancakes, the kids always want to get super involved. And this plate has been dubbed the pancake plate in our home because every time I make pancakes, that's the plate I reach for. I cannot wrap my head around what went wrong with my sourdough bread. I've been trying to think about it and figure it out, and I just don't know. I counted it as a loss yesterday. I baked it. Obviously it didn't turn out, but it wasn't for nothing because after I baked it, I cubed it up and baked it again until all these little cubes were completely dry and hard. So now I'm going to blitz these up and turn this into breadcrumbs, which works out because I was out of breadcrumbs anyway. So now we have sourdough breadcrumbs for the freezer, but reality is we still need bread. So I ended up just making my usual bread recipe that is not sourdough just because I didn't have the sourdough fed and ready and whatever. We'll try again another day, but for this time, we're just gonna go with classic commercial yeast. This afternoon, I wanna make some eggnog because this weekend is Canadian Thanksgiving. By the time you see this, it will already be past Canadian Thanksgiving. But Thanksgiving time for us means the start of eggnog season. So I'm gonna make some from scratch today. I make this all the time in winter and it is a family favorite recipe for sure. This recipe is super easy and does not involve any alcohol at all. It's just cream and milk, nutmeg and salt in a pot. You want to warm it up until it comes to just about a simmer. Meanwhile, this is when I separate all my egg whites from the yolks. You only want the yolks for this, and because I'm making a double recipe, I'm doing an entire dozen eggs. I cut the sugar in half for this one. I do find it gets really sweet. So I do half the amount of sugar and then very slowly add the hot cream into the egg white mixture and then a splash of vanilla as well. It comes together really quickly. The ingredients are super clean and very simple, but this doesn't last very long in our household. Okay, I just got the kids tucked into bed and I'm about to get myself ready for bed as well. But before I do, I'm going to super quick whip up some breakfast for tomorrow. I love this recipe because it is so fast. And then it requires very little prep in the morning as well. And it's sourdough, which is a bonus. I've had my starter this morning. All I need to do is throw in some flour, water, and sourdough starter into my mixer, let it mix up, and then let it sit overnight. And then we get to enjoy English muffins tomorrow morning for breakfast. I love the sourdough English muffin recipe from Lisa at Farmhouse on Boone. Though when I make it, I add 3 cups of flour to my dough instead of 2.5. And the dough is going to look really thick and really shaggy. And every time I do this, I question if it's too much, but every morning when I come to check on it, it always works perfectly. In fact, this time I actually had to add even more flour in the morning after I added the rest of the ingredients. Because the dough was just a bit too wet and sticky to work with. For this one, I usually do a single recipe at a time and I divide the dough into 10 English muffins. I shape them the same way I shape buns, except instead of rounding them into a ball, I flatten them off a little bit and dip them into cornmeal. Then to cook these, I just use my caraway pans. A little bit of butter on the bottom, place the English muffins inside. I do this on a very low heat and then I put the lids on to help these cook. And then in about 10 minutes, I'll flip them over and I'll cook them for another, 5 minutes and then they're ready. Sometimes we eat these just with jam and butter, but I often like to make a side of scrambled eggs to go with our English muffins. Sometimes we'll even do English muffin sandwiches, like a fried egg and cheese and bacon. But this morning we kept it simple with some of the apple butter that I made earlier, some homemade raspberry jam and butter and scrambled eggs. We've already gone through a whole jar of this, so this is all we have left, and I made this yesterday. That is where I'm going to end today's video. Thank you so much for joining me this week in my kitchen making food for my family. I hope you got some inspiration from this. As always, I will leave links in the description box below as well as the recipes. And don't forget to check Caraway for the best non-toxic kitchenware. You can use my code LUBKY10 for 10% off site-wide, and when you get the bundle, you're also saving an additional 20%. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.